You're listening to the Chapter a Day Bible Study. I'm John Stange, and today we're in 1 Samuel 8. The people of Israel demand a king. When we read 1 Samuel 8, we can see that the people of Israel had reached an interesting turning point. For years, the Lord faithfully led his people through judges whom he raised up at just the right time. It was a form of leadership that worked, but it also required ongoing trust in the Lord to provide the help that was needed. Samuel had become the last of those judges, serving as both a prophet and a spiritual leader. But as 1 Samuel 8 opens, Samuel was growing old, and his sons, whom he appointed as judges, they didn't share his character. Instead of walking faithfully with God, verse 3 tells us, they turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. The elders of Israel looked at this disappointing situation, and they decided they needed a different solution. Rather than asking God to raise up another faithful leader, they demanded a king. Their request probably sounded practical and even reasonable to many of the ears at the time, but it exposed hearts that had drifted away from trusting the Lord. In verse 5, we read this, "Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations." Those final words reveal the real issue, like all the nations. Well, Israel wasn't called to be like the surrounding nations. God chose them to be distinct, demonstrating what it looked like to live under his loving rule, but instead they wanted to blend in. Well, Samuel was grieved by their request, understandably, but instead of reacting emotionally, he prayed. And I think that response is worth noticing. When faced with disappointment or criticism, Samuel didn't argue with the people first. He brought the issue to the Lord. And prayer has a way of bringing clarity before we speak or act. And I imagine the Lord's response must have actually been somewhat heartbreaking for Samuel to hear. But in verse 7, we read this, "And the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them." It's interesting because the people thought they were rejecting Samuel's leadership, but God revealed that the rejection went much deeper than that. They were rejecting him. Well, this chapter reminds us that our greatest problem isn't usually the circumstances we face. It's the temptation to believe that God isn't enough. Israel assumed that having a human king would solve their problems. They looked around at the military strength and the political systems of their neighboring nations, and they concluded that they needed the same thing. Well, how often do we do the exact same thing, or at least something similar? We might believe we'll finally have peace if we earn more money, or find the perfect job, or gain recognition, or improve our health, or achieve some other personal goal. Now, none of these things are inherently wrong, but when we begin trusting them more than we trust God, we've made the same mistake Israel made. Well, God graciously instructed Samuel to warn the people about what an earthly king would actually do. And there are several things on this list that I think should have really stood out to them, including some drastic changes to the freedom and the manner of living that they had enjoyed up to this point, because they're told that the king would draft their sons into military service, require their daughters to serve in his household, claim the best of their fields and vineyards, collect taxes, and even take their servants and their livestock. Samuel summarized the future this way in verse 18. He said, "And in that day, you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." God wasn't trying to keep good things from Israel. He was lovingly warning them about the cost of replacing his rule with human solutions. Earthly rulers, even the best among them, are sinners. They eventually disappoint the very people who place their hope in them. But sadly, the warning didn't change their minds. In verses 19 and 20, we read this, "But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, 'No, but there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us and fight our battles.'" Notice the irony here. God had already gone before Israel countless times. He defeated Egypt, he parted the Red Sea, he brought down the walls of Jericho, and he repeatedly delivered them from their enemies during the period of the judges, and yet they forgot his faithfulness, and they wanted someone they could see. And that's often the struggle of faith, because it's easier to trust what our eyes can presently see than to trust the God who rules from heaven. We've all struggled with that very same thing. And again, as we read this chapter, I know it's tempting to criticize Israel, but their story really does reflect our own hearts as well, because we also tend to replace trust in God with trust in people, institutions, possessions, or even sometimes our own abilities. We may never specifically ask for an earthly king, but we often look for something else to provide the security and the significance that only God can give. Now, thankfully, 1 Samuel 8 doesn't end the story. While Israel chose the wrong kind of king, God was preparing the way for the right king. Israel's first kings, Saul and even David, they would reveal the limitations of human leadership. We're going to see in coming chapters that Saul would fail dramatically. And David, though he was a man after God's own heart, he would still fall into serious sin as well. Every king who then followed would remind God's people that no merely human ruler could fully lead them or save them or even satisfy them. And all of that points us to Jesus. Jesus is the king Israel truly needed. Unlike Saul, he never acted from pride or insecurity. Unlike David, he never sinned. Unlike every earthly ruler, he doesn't take from his people to enrich himself. Instead, he gave himself for his people. Earthly kings demand sacrifice from their subjects. King Jesus became the sacrifice for his subjects. He doesn't exploit his people, he serves them. He doesn't rule through selfish ambition. He reigns in perfect righteousness, wisdom, and love. When Jesus entered Jerusalem before his crucifixion, he fulfilled the promise of God's coming king by riding in humility, not displaying earthly power. His throne would first be a cross before it became a throne of glory. Through his death and his resurrection, he secured an everlasting kingdom that can never fail. The question 1 Samuel 8 leaves us with is still relevant today. Who will be our king? Every day we're tempted to trust visible things more than the invisible God. Every day we're tempted to believe that something else will fight our battles, or secure our future, or even satisfy our hearts. But every substitute king eventually disappoints. Jesus never will. He alone is the righteous king who deserves our trust. He alone reigns forever. And when we willingly submit our lives to his loving rule, we discover that the king Israel rejected is the very king our hearts have been longing for all along. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Chapter a Day Bible Study. For more resources to help you in your walk with Christ and your understanding of the Bible, please visit my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And if you'd like to partner with me by becoming a supporter of this ministry, you'll see a few options to do so, again, at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com or in the description of this episode. As always, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your support, and thank you for your willingness to share this content with others. Have a great day, and I'll see you again right here tomorrow.